in a cave in the Lubombo Mountains of southern Africa, in the ash of a fireplace, lie 55 small charred lumps. They are rhizomes, the thick underground stems of a plant that still grows on the hillside outside the cave, known today as the yellow star. Somebody dug them out of that hillside with a wooden stick, carried them back, and buried them in the hot ash of the fire to roast. These particular ones were forgotten, or dropped, or pushed too deep, and they burned. They are about 170,000 years old, and they are the oldest cooked meal ever found. Not a hunt, not a mammoth, a basket of roots, cooked in ashes and shared out around a fire. This is where the popular picture of the ancient diet goes wrong. The image everyone carries is meat, and meat mattered enormously. But for most people, in most places through most of the deep past, the calories came out of the ground. Start with the working day because food was the working day. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our future documentaries. Thank you for your support. Now, let's continue. Gathering was the reliable half of the food supply, and it was steady, physical, unglamorous labour. It meant walking out from camp, often several miles, and spending hours with a sharpened stick, levering roots and tubers out of hard ground. A single good patch could yield an armload, and the plants grow in clusters, so knowing where the patches were mattered more than luck. That knowledge sat in the heads of the people who had walked that country for 40 years. The digging sticks themselves were made with care. In one cave, the sticks turn up alongside the roots they were used to pull. Elsewhere, people were choosing the hardest wood available and charring the outside in a fire so they could scrape it into shape, because the alternative was working a wood that would not cut. The work was split up. In every group of people who still live this way, the steady plant food is brought in mostly by women, often with small children along, and the hunting is done mostly by men. Older people who can no longer walk far do the processing back at camp, cracking, pounding, tending the fire and minding children, which frees younger adults to cover ground. And the most valuable thing anyone carried was in their head. Which slope holds the good roots? Which month the fruit ripens on the far ridge? Which of two nearly identical plants will kill you? Where water still stands in the third year of a drought? That information takes decades to accumulate and can only be handed down by talking, which makes an old person the most important asset a group has, and explains why humans, almost alone among animals, live long past the age of reproducing. Roots and tubers were the backbone because they are always there. Fruit is seasonal, game moves. But underground storage organs sit in the same ground year-round. They store starch, and they do not run away. The catch is that raw, most of them are barely food. They are fibrous, tough, and hard to chew, and a body gets only a fraction of what is inside. Roasting them in ash changes everything. It softens the fibre, loosens the skin so it peels and releases the starch. Cooking is what turned a marginal food into a staple. Around those roots came everything else the season offered. Nuts cracked open on stone anvils that got pitted from years of pounding. Wild olives, wild grapes, wild barley, berries, seeds that had to be beaten out of the heads of grasses and cleaned. Birds and their eggs. Tortoises, which are slow and easy and were eaten in enormous numbers wherever they lived. Lizards, fish, speared or trapped in shallows or scooped from drying pools. Along the coast, shellfish pried off rocks at low tide by the basket load, and the shell middens left behind are so thick they form hills. Living off a shoreline meant living by the tide rather than the sun. The rocks are only reachable for a couple of hours around low water, and low water shifts by roughly 50 minutes each day, and runs deepest around the full and new moon. People who ate that way had to track the moon and time their walk to the shore days in advance. It is one of the oldest schedules any human being has ever kept, and by 160,000 years ago, groups on the southern African coast were keeping it. And insects, which get left out of every documentary and were probably eaten constantly. Termites come out of the ground in vast numbers after rain and are almost pure fat and protein, and getting at them takes nothing more than a stick pushed into the mound and pulled out covered. Caterpillars, grubs cut out of rotten wood, locusts taken by the handful when they swarm. All of it easy, safe and available to children, which matters, because children who can feed themselves change the arithmetic of a whole group. Then there was honey, which was worth risking a great deal for. Honey is the densest natural food available anywhere, and it comes with bee larvae in the comb, which are fat and protein on top of the sugar. Groups that still forage today can get a large share of their annual calories from it in season. Getting it means locating the nest, usually high in a tree or deep in a rock crevice, climbing to it, often driving pegs into the trunk to get up there, and smoking the colony into a stupor with a bundle of smouldering green leaves while being stung dozens of times. People did it every year, everywhere bees lived, and images of figures climbing to raided nests turn up in rock art on more than one continent. Now the meat. For a long stretch, meat came from animals other predators had killed. Getting to a carcass fast, driving off whatever was on it, and taking what was left is not glamorous, and what was left was rarely the good parts. The head and the lower legs stay behind because they are mostly bone. Inside those bones is marrow, and inside the skull is brain, and both are extremely rich. Cracking them open with a stone was the opening move of the entire human meat habit. Hunting came later, and never became reliable. Even for skilled hunters with good weapons, most days end with nothing. Groups that hunt today come home empty-handed on the majority of attempts, and the difference between a good week and a bad one is enormous. Nobody could build a life on that alone, so the pattern almost everywhere was the same. Plants and small easy animals supplied the daily floor. Meat came in spikes, and when it came, it was shared out at the fire, because a carcass rots and a debt does not. Where the kill was too big to eat at once, the race was against decay. Strips of meat were cut thin and hung in the smoke above a fire, which dries them and keeps the flies off. In cold country, meat was cached under rock piles or sunk into cold water and pulled out weeks later. In hot country, there was almost no way to keep it, which is exactly why sharing was not generosity. A carcass given away today comes back as a share of somebody else's kill next month, and that arrangement fed people far more reliably than any single hunter could. Cooking sat underneath all of it. Roots and rhizomes went into ash. Meat went on coals or on stones heated beside them. Marrow bones were set near the heat to soften. Heat also killed the parasites in flesh and broke down the compounds that make many plants inedible raw, which quietly doubled the number of things a person could eat. Some of that knowledge was bought at a terrible price. A landscape is full of plants that look edible and are not. Bitter tubers loaded with cyanide compounds, seeds that cause vomiting, roots that are food after long soaking and leaching and poison before it. Every one of those procedures was worked out by somebody, and the first few attempts at each one did not end well. What survives in the record is only the successful version, passed down as a rule with no explanation attached. Soak this one 3 days, do not touch that one at all. None of it was steady across the year. Every foraging environment has a lean season, usually the end of the dry months, or the depth of winter, when the fruit is gone, the game is thin, and the good roots are used up. What people fall back on then are the foods nobody wants, the tough fibrous ones that take a lot of processing and return little. Hunger was not a catastrophe. It was a season, and it came around every year. The bodies show the strain. Teeth of people from those periods carry fine horizontal lines in the enamel, laid down when growth stopped during illness or hunger in childhood, and started again afterward. Almost everybody has them. Farther north, the arithmetic changed completely. In Ice Age Europe, there is no digging roots out of frozen ground for half the year, and the diet swung hard toward meat. Chemical signatures in Neanderthal bone put them near the top of the food chain, on a par with wolves and hyenas. But even there, the picture is not all mammoth steaks. Hardened plaque on Neanderthal teeth has trapped what they were chewing, and it holds starch grains from plants, some of them cooked, including grains from wild grasses and dates. It holds traces of mushrooms and pine nuts, and in one case it holds bitter plants with no food value at all, of the kind that were used as medicine within living memory. The teeth carry another surprise. Cavities were rare. A diet with almost no free sugar and no refined flour does not rot teeth. What it does instead is grind them flat because everything was gritty. Stone tools shed particles, grinding stones shed sand, roots come out of the ground with dirt in them. By middle age, most people had worn their molars down to stumps. Water shaped the day as much as food. Camps sat within reach of a river, a spring or a seep, and the walk to water happened every day. In dry country, people carried it in ostrich eggshells, drilled with a hole at the top and sometimes decorated, and by 60,000 years ago they were making them in quantity. Then something changed in the way food was handled. 23,000 years ago, at a lakeside camp in what is now Israel, people were collecting the seeds of wild grasses in bulk and grinding them into flour on a flat stone. Grinding seeds is enormous labour for a small return, and nobody does it unless the easier foods are already spoken for. It is also, roughly, the beginning of the road that ends in bread and in agriculture. So what did the first humans really eat? There is no single answer, and that is the whole point. The diet of a group living on the southern African coast, eating shellfish and roots, has almost nothing in common with the diet of a group hunting reindeer in Ice Age France, or one fishing a river in the Levant, or one living off tortoises and termites in dry scrub. The one thing they all shared was flexibility. A human being can live on almost anything, and that is the actual adaptation. The animals painted on cave walls are the ones people hunted, remembered, and feared. But the meal that kept most of those painters alive was a handful of roots, dug out of a hillside with a wooden stick and roasted in the ashes of a fire.